Many of us are frustrated with the nearly 80 million Americans who are still not vaccinated. You might be confused about what is true and what is false about COVID-19. And to make matters worse, there are elected officials actively working to undermine the fight against COVID-19.
So let's just say there's a vaccine that is approved and even distributed before the election. Would you get it?
Well, I think that's going to be an issue for all of us. But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
If and when the vaccine comes, and it's not likely to go through all the tests that needs to be and the trials that are needed to be done. And the question of whether it's real when it's there, that requires enormous transparency. You got to make all of it available to other experts across the nation so they can look and see. So there's consensus this is a safe vaccine. When we finally do, God willing, get a vaccine, who's going to take the shot? Who's going to take the shot? You can be the first one to say, sign me up. They now say it's okay. If Donald Trump can't give answers and the administration can't give answers to these three questions, the American people should not have confidence. If the president announced tomorrow we have a vaccine, would you take it? Only if it was completely transparent that other experts in the country could look at it. Only if we knew all of what went into it. But the world's leading scientists confirm.
Yes, science! Don't forget to smash that subscribe button.
There are no limits.
That if you are fully vaccinated, your risk of severe illness from COVID-19 is very low. Only 1 out of every 160,000 fully vaccinated Americans was hospitalized for COVID per day.
But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
And a distinct minority of Americans, supported by a distinct minority of elected officials.
I hate your stinking guts. You make me vomit. You're a scum between my toes.
Supported by a distinct minority of elected officials, are keeping us from turning the corner.
But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it,
You're coming out here saying that we got to take one for the team. Everyone's got to pitch in for this, but Congress is exempt and illegal immigrants are exempt. It's only the American citizens who have to go through this. So all of the arguments from the left, just put them in the toilet.
So ivermectin is on the WHO list of essential medicines. You would never know that. You would think that this is some kind of horse medicine drug instead of what it actually is, and a medicine that's been prescribed to billions of people around the world and is on the WHO list of essential medicines. In fact, this is from the NIH. The NIH says it has had a measurable beneficial impact in improving the lives and welfare of billions of people throughout the world. That's from the NIH. They're talking about ivermectin, and it has immeasurably beneficial impact in improving the lives and welfare of billions of people throughout the world.
COVID vaccines do not necessarily prevent you from getting COVID. The COVID vaccine does not prevent you from spreading COVID to other people. The long-term effects of the COVID vaccines are unknown and at this point cannot be known. We do know the vaccines are many times less effective than natural immunity in protecting people, and close to 100 million Americans already have natural immunity.
We've heard a lot recently about the fact that maybe the virus did start in the lab. Let's talk about that. The fact that there is this lab, I think it's the only one in the world quite like it, in Wuhan, where it started. It would almost be a conspiracy theory to think it didn't start in the lab.
How did this happen?
Yeah, I'm against funding Chinese research in our country, but I'm sure against funding it in China. The NIH gives this $3.7 million grant to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. They then advertise that they need coronavirus researchers. Following that, coronavirus erupts in Wuhan.
And that theory was demonized at first, that, it can't, come on, that's conspiracy thinking, that it would started in the lab. But it certainly is a 50-50, would you say that?
It's far more likely than that. As a matter of fact, I said, I think in June, that the chances that it came from the lab looked to me to be about 90%.
Okay.
So this was never a conspiracy theory. In fact, that term is simply used to make it go away. It's an obvious hypothesis that is in need of testing, and we are only now, a year in, getting to the point where we can discuss it out loud without being stigmatized.
Dr. Fauci, do you still support funding of the NIH funding of the lab in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, with all due respect, you are entirely and completely incorrect.
You don't think inserting a bat virus spike protein that he got from the Wuhan Institute into the SARS virus is gain of function?
At first, I was going to say, oh, when they make me get this, I want the mRNA because it's new. I feel like it's an improvement over the old ones. Then I heard you say, no, even though you're a little squirrely about it tonight, I heard you say you want the one where they have a little piece of the virus in it, the way they did it for many, many years.
In gene therapy, a functional copy of the gene is delivered into a patient's own cells. Gene therapy uses engineered viruses to deliver genes into cells. These are called viral vectors. Vectors made from adeno-associated virus, or AAV. In gene therapy, the two native AAV genes are removed and replaced with DNA that contains a functional gene with instructions to produce a normal protein. Once administered, AAV vectors enter the patient's cells and deliver a copy of the functional gene directly into the nucleus.
Australia has dropped development of a local vaccine candidate after trial participants came back with positive test results for HIV.
Like winning.
And biotech company CSL was still in early stages of testing when developers found it could interfere with HIV diagnosis. They are concerned that if it's rolled out, it could trigger a wave of positive HIV tests.
You know, I get tiger blood, man.
Then I heard about the lab. And I was like, wait, if they made that one in the lab, do I really want a little piece of that virus in me? Is it possible there's something in a lab-made virus that is different and would make a vaccine different than the ones we've had for decades, which were made from viruses that occurred in nature?
The adenovirus is one that you have history with, or at least viruses in that family. You are very unlikely to have any evolutionary history with beta coronaviruses, which are the ones that SARS-CoV-2 comes from. So just from the point of view of what unexpected might happen if we give you the adenovirus vaccine, it's much less likely to be dramatic than lipid nanoparticles, which is what the mRNA vaccines are packaged in.
The advantages of the technology stem from the microfluidic chamber, which enables rapid mixing under laminar conditions. As the fluids mix, on first contact, the cationic lipids complex with the negatively charged nucleic acid to form the beginnings of the particle core. The helper lipids aggregate further as they come into contact with the aqueous solution. Finally, the PEG lipids orient themselves on the surface with hydrophobic tails pointing inwards. This process creates uniform particles and is highly reproducible.
Fauci, even Dr. Fauci, this is from August 2020, Dr. Fauci said everyone has the right to refuse a vaccine. If someone refuses the vaccine in the general public, then there's nothing you can do about that. You cannot force someone to take a vaccine, he said. What changed? Well, here's Nancy Pelosi.
So here's the thing. We cannot require someone to be vaccinated. That's just not what we can do. It is a matter of privacy to know who is or who isn't.
Here's school bus drivers in Chicago quit.
As of August 12th, only about 28% of young black New Yorkers are vaccinated.
So as of August 12th, 28% of young African Americans in New York are vaccinated.
And that's...
What's the science there?
Yes, science! Don't forget to smash that subscribe button.
You know, and when something doesn't make sense, such as radically expanding this totalitarian approach to vaccinations to include curtailing your ability to travel unless you take a medication, you have to wonder, if it's not science, what is it? And what it is, as you point out, it's politics. And the specific politics here is anti-Trump supporter politics.
Don Lemon, as Tucker calls him, on Wednesday night, took it to a new level. He was taking aim at the some 46% of Americans who are not fully vaccinated.
Coddling people when it comes to this and the vaccine, saying, oh, you can't shame them. You can't call them stupid. You can't call them silly. Yes, they are.
So it's time to start shaming people, Glenn, because our moral arbiters, Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo, know better.
But I also think it's really important to hear them say that openly and that explicitly, because that is how they think. Do you know that 74 million people in the United States, 74 million, are 18 years or younger? And the grand total of people who have died from COVID since the beginning of the pandemic 16 months ago, who are 18 or younger, is 362. 362 out of 74 million, a virtually non-existent risk. It's going to backfire, because the more you hear people like Don Lemon telling you that you're stupid if you don't obey, the more the instinct is to just purposely defy what he's telling you to do. That's how we got Trump in the first place.
That address, Biden's address, was the most divisive speech ever given by a modern American president. Your fellow Americans are dangerous to you. They could kill you. And only the Biden administration can save you. Quote, we're going to protect vaccinated workers from unvaccinated workers. That's what the president said. How? What exactly is the risk to the vaccinated from the unvaccinated?
As a researcher at the Salk Institute, he pioneered in vitro RNA transfection technology. He subsequently pioneered many new innovations in the fields of RNA vaccination and immunization. We welcome his expertise, Dr. Robert Malone. Let me just go ahead and I'm going to jump ahead and just ask you a question. What are the bioethics of the current campaign to get the vaccine in everyone's arm?
I strongly object to mandatory vaccination. Now, the important thing to understand about all this, I think, for all of us, is there are no perfect vaccines, just like there are no perfect drugs. Government acknowledges that there are risks associated with these vaccines, such as birth defects, cardiac risks, reactivation of latent viruses. We know this as shingles, also Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus, and other viruses that can be triggered by vaccination, may also be triggered by the infection. So there is a portfolio of risks, only some of which are understood. What we're doing by excessively using vaccine inappropriately for people who don't really need it is that we're driving the virus to be able to escape through evolutionary selection.
To understand how quickly bacteria become resistant to even the most powerful drugs, we visited Harvard University biologist Michael Bain. Bain pours a solution containing ciprofloxacin, or Cipro, a broad-spectrum antibiotic.
This has no antibiotic.
This has no antibiotic.
This one?
This one has just over what the bacteria are able to survive.
It should kill them.
It should kill them.
The next pool?
10 times as much.
Okay.
100 times as much.
Then Bain drops E. coli bacteria at both ends of the table.
There are about 1 million bacteria in there.
Okay.
So the bacteria start at both sides and they race to the center.
Now, we all understand how this works intuitively because most of us are aware that the agricultural practice in feedlots and other places of medicating or chicken houses, of medicating poultry and livestock indiscriminately with antibiotic leads to antibiotic-resistant superbugs that then turn around and attack us.
Chickenizing farms and food, which chronicles the rise of factory farming. We need it to feed the world, she says, but not by feeding low doses of antibiotics to livestock, prevent disease before it happens.
Between 70 and 80% of total antibiotic production is used in agriculture. When bacteria are exposed to low doses of antibiotics, bacteria are stressed but not killed, and the community sends out signals whereby they share resistance genes.
Really?
Actually, low-dose antibiotics over a long period of time are much worse than high-dose. We are coming up against the end of the age of antibiotics.
So the bacteria start at both sides and they race to the center.
In just a few days, some of the E. coli bacteria resist the Cipro and survive a deadly environment.
And if you look right here, they're starting to grow into the center.
Stronger than you would ever give to a patient.
Exactly.
And yet they're
beginning to evolve.
Each one of these little things that you see on it, that's a mutant that's developed resistance and started to grow. This is evolution happening.
That means that the E. coli has already outwitted Cipro.
In 12 days.
Which is why the overuse of the drugs is so dangerous. Each time we take an antibiotic, bacteria can develop the same kind of resistance in our bodies.
Overuse of vaccines will drive the development of viruses that are able to evade vaccination. The effectiveness of the vaccine is dropping quite rapidly because of the evolution of the virus to escape it. This is one of the lessons coming out of Israel and the UK.
It thought it had vaccinated its way out of the pandemic, but now Israel is in the midst of its fourth wave, with the number of daily new infections steadily rising to more than 6,000 now, a 6 months high.
One more graph and I'll go to your calls. Start the shots, 2.5 weeks later, mass illness and death. Okay, just boom. The lines actually converge. So here's Norway right here, same damn thing. Take the shots, boom. Nobody's sick, boom, start getting sick. Oh, that's really great. Look at this. This is new daily confirmed COVID-19 cases per million people. Wow, look at Israel. Palestine, only 10% shot up. Israel's 9%. They're 5 times worse. More than 5 times worse. Lebanon, basically, nobody's vaccinated. But that's how it works, see?
The Delta variant is spreading at an alarming rate, so the government launched a booster third jab campaign to those above the age of 60. It's a world first. But why a third jab? Health experts say it has to do with the effectiveness of the vaccine over time.
On a research basis, you see a steep decline along the first 5 months. Starting with the 6th month, it's 6% a month decline. So if you take these two facts, that among the vaccinated earlier, you see more severe cases with less background diseases, although very few of them get to be on respirator, but still they are severe, and you don't see it on those who were vaccinated in the last 4 or 5 months.
High levels of vaccination are associated with escape mutants. Those escape mutants are able to infect even the vaccinated. The vaccinated do shed virus and replicate virus. They still do get disease, although maybe less disease. And in some ways that might be worse, because that means the vaccinated that do have breakthrough infections are walking around feeling relatively healthy and yet producing and shedding just as much virus as the people that have received vaccine. And so we have a word for that. We call it super spreaders.
Over 100,000 fans packed shoulder to shoulder at Lollapalooza in Chicago.
The Delta variant may have health officials on edge, but you wouldn't know it from the looks of the crowds at the Lollapalooza Music Festival. And while at this point, it's not clear it'll become a super spreader event,
vaccines are being offered on site.
Anybody who wants to get vaccinated, Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer vaccine.
But some experts are saying everyone at Lollapalooza should assume they've been exposed to the virus.
But things are going to get worse. If you look at the acceleration of the number of cases, the 7-day average has gone up substantially.
Democrats ignoring warnings like that from top Biden officials and are now being called major COVID hypocrites after a weekend of breaking their own rules.
Was there concern that this President Obama birthday party might become a super spreader event?
Well, I think, Peter, the guidance is about what steps people can take when they're in public settings. Indoor settings specifically was the new guidance to keep themselves and others safe.
I always carry around this that a woman gave me. It means a lot to me. I better give that to her.
Okay, this isn't even just a gathering of 100 people. The reports are that it is a 500-person guest list.
The party did go on. Hundreds of guests in attendance. The former president can be seen in pictures hitting the dance floor without a mask. We're told that he danced all night and had a great time. Happy birthday to the president.
As we mentioned in our conversation with Bill Gates, a Kaiser Family Foundation survey found that more than half of unvaccinated Americans think the vaccine is more dangerous than COVID.
It's an unproven vaccine. It's just being accelerated and eliminated virtually every safety study.
He is the ultimate super spreader, not of the coronavirus, experts say, but of misinformation about COVID-19. His name is Dr. Joseph Mercola. That's exactly why the Center for Countering Digital Hate, a nonprofit tracking misinformation about COVID online, put Dr. Mercola, an osteopathic physician, at the top of its disinformation dozen. A list of 12 people, the group says, were the source for sharing 65% of all anti-vaccine messaging on Facebook and Twitter.
In an outbreak, you cannot vaccinate your way out during an active outbreak with an imperfect, leaky vaccine. And this logic that we're going to mandate vaccination in, this company or that company or whatever, when you look at it now, it is outdated and grossly naive. The vaccinated can spread infection and disease. The unvaccinated can spread infectious disease. And the vaccine, to the extent the vaccine provides benefit, it only is good for about 6 months. Okay, are we all going to take revaccination every 6 months? Could there be a problem with that? Well, actually, there is. Okay, that logic absolutely requires data, because those of us that have gray hair and have been around a little while in the vaccine world know and understand immunology, know that there's a thing called high zone tolerance. Vaccines are not linear. Dose response in vaccines are not linear. The immune system is really complicated, and more is not always better. Sometimes more can turn off the immune system, can shut it down. So we can't just assume that a third jab or a fourth jab or a fifth jab is going to do good. It actually might make the immune response worse, not only in people who have just received vaccine, but potentially also in those that have the benefits of natural infection. So it's just bad science, it's bad policy, it's bad ethics.
Requirement for people at a business with more than 100 people, it is not a requirement for migrants at the southern border. Why?
That's correct. Go ahead.
Nearly 11,000 migrants, predominantly from Haiti, are packed under the international bridge between Del Rio and Mexico, with sources telling...
Look at these remarkable images that our great drone crew shot here yesterday. What you're looking at here is what sources are telling us are more than 10,500 migrants waiting underneath that international bridge here in Del Rio. What's happening? The reason for that is because Border Patrol is so overwhelmed. They don't have the manpower to process these folks, and their holding facilities out here no longer have capacity. They're well over capacity, so there's not really anywhere for these folks to go. These are
requirement for people at a business with more than 100 people. It is not a requirement for migrants at the southern border. Why?
That's correct. Go ahead.
And now that everything is politics, that's all we do. If their side says COVID is nothing, our side has to say it's everything. Trump said it would go away like a miracle, and we said it was World War Z. Trump said we should ingest household disinfectants, and we laughed, as we should, of course. And then it turned out 19% of America was literally drenching the fruit in Clorox. And now, of course, we find out that all that paranoia about surfaces was bullshit anyway. If you lie to people, even for a very good cause, you lose their trust. I get it. Doctors tell people lies because they don't trust you to finish the antibiotics after your dick starts feeling better. Researchers at Dartmouth built a database recently monitoring the COVID coverage of the major news outlets across the world and found that while other countries mix the good news in with the bad, the U.S. national media reported almost 90% bad news. And politicians, they lie because it's their nature to cover their ass so they don't get blamed if things goes badly. And also to keep in practice. When all of our sources for medical information have an agenda to spin us.
What's your problem?
How are you today, sir?
Okay, how's it going?
Fine, thank you. When all of our sources for medical information have an agenda to spin us, yeah, you wind up with a badly misinformed population, including on the left. But what about liberals? You know, the high information by the science people?
Yes, science! Don't forget to smash that subscribe button and follow me on Patreon.
The first part of the plan is to vaccinate the unvaccinated. This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. We're also going to require nearly all healthcare workers to get vaccinated. And in total, these vaccination requirements will cover 100 million workers. And the vaccine requirements work, and more companies are instituting them. Even at Fox News, they require it.
It's a new morning in America. Fresh, vital. The old cynicism is gone. We're optimistic as to what becomes of it all. It really boils down to our ability to accept. There are no limits.
It figures it would be something like this.
And so that's partly him playing to their base and playing to their audience, the credulous boomer Rube demo that backs Donald Trump, that wants to think that Donald Trump's a smart one and y'all elitists are dumb.
You elitists with your geography and your maps and your spelling, even though
your math and your reading.
Yeah, you're reading, your geography, knowing other countries, sipping your latte.
All those lines on the map.
What I'm saying is the planet's on fucking fire. There are a lot of things we could do to put it out. Are any of them free? No, of course not. Nothing's free, you idiots. Grow the fuck up. You're not children anymore. I didn't mind explaining photosynthesis to you when you were 12, but you're adults now, and this is an actual crisis. Got it?
And so I think we have to stop coddling people when it comes to this and the vaccine, saying, oh, you can't shame them. You can't call them stupid. You can't call them silly. Yes, they are. The people who aided and abetted Trump are stupid because they believed his big lie. The people who are not getting vaccines, who are believing the lies on the internet instead of science.
Yes, science! Don't forget to smash that subscribe button and follow me on Patreon.
It's time to start shaming them. What else? Or leave them behind.
Make us all carry smartphones to track our every movement, and then bring in a carbon tax calorie counting system that doesn't just track everywhere you go. It tells you when you can get in a car, when you can drive, where you can go, who you can visit, what type of job you can have. I mean, just hellish level of control. And then they're going to organize the people that do opt into it into a mob of people that hate those of us that aren't part of it, claiming that because we didn't join the authoritarianism, that's why they're sick, that's why they're starving, that's why they're dying. And as the tyranny gets worse and worse and worse, by the time the sheep wake up, they're already basically in the gulag.
Are we terminated? Is that what you said?
No.
Eddie, you said we're terminated?
Pardon?
Did you say that we were terminated?
Your access has been denied.
Are we terminated?
And yes, ma'am, you are.
So you're firing us?
Effective 9/1. You are off payroll effective 9/1.
Are you firing us?
I will not answer your specific questions. I have told you where I'm going.
But I have not quit. So am I being fired?
You are being terminated.
Because they are keeping the majority of Americans behind.
Are you trying to get logged on to a computer, or so you do not work here anymore? Talked to HR yesterday.
I did not quit, and I was not fired. There are only two options. I have not quit, and I have not received a termination letter.
You're going to have to leave. We need your badge, and we need you to leave.
No.
We're going to ask that you do the right thing, and you leave right now.
No, you guys chose not to do the right thing by not giving us a choice. We did not quit. Okay, so
there was a choice.
Okay, so then fire us.
You didn't.
So then fire us.
So I'm the director of security, and under my authority, I need both your ID badges.
I need my
now.
termination letter.
I need your ID badges right now. This doesn't have to go this way. You can cooperate or you cannot.
You don't have any grounds to say
I do
that.
have grounds.
No, you don't.
The people talking about, well, I don't know what's in the shot, Chris. I don't know what's in that shot.
I'll tell you what's not in it.
Hold on,
a tracking device.
Yeah.
Positive test results for HIV.
Like winning.
When developers found it could interfere with HIV diagnosis.
You know, I got tiger blood, man.
Japan has suspended use of 1.63 million doses of the Moderna shot. The move comes more than a week after domestic distributor Takeda received reports of contaminants in some vials.
I have received a specific report from the Health Ministry about contaminants in Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine. I have instructed the Health Ministry to deal with the issue, considering safety as a priority after analysing the current situation.
Lockdowns across Australia will remain until at least 70% of its population is fully vaccinated. Only about 40% of Australians have received both doses.
Good evening. Violent clashes have put 6 police officers in hospital with broken bones after they were attacked and stomped on by anti-lockdown protesters.
Cornered in a gorge, they linked arms and escaped by force.
Not even capsicum spray could stop this man in black pushing one officer, then tackling a female member to the ground, collecting supporters.
We will not comply. The people united will never be defeated.
We want to go back to work. We want no f***ing job.
Why is the TGA lying to us? Shutting down the suburbs, they bypassed already crippled businesses and somehow walls of armed and mounted police.
That's where boosters come in. The shots that give you even more protection than after your second shot.
A panel of 18 medical experts, an FDA advisory panel, met today for hours to consider whether to recommend a third Pfizer shot for everybody who's already had the first 2 shots, everybody who's already been fully vaccinated against COVID. If you tuned into the live stream of this meeting today, it was sort of exactly what you'd expect a scientific meeting to look like. Lots of charts and slides and bullet-pointed lists. Should everybody over 16 get a booster shot? The answer in the end was no.
Of course, I had to step away, but my sense is that they're going to talk next about narrowing that down to seniors, maybe 65 and older, these people who are at the highest risk of severe illness and death. And it seemed like there was appetite among the panelists to accept boosters for that population, while saying that we still need some more data for the younger people.
Hey, Andrew. So this is an agreement to supply 1.7 million courses of this drug, which is called molnupiravir. It's an oral antiviral drug. This deal, which would be worth $1.2 billion, is only, of course, if the drug gets emergency use authorization or approval. Now, this is a pill for COVID that you would take twice a day.
Pfizer announcing it is starting a human clinical trial of a pill for COVID-19. This would be an oral antiviral drug targeting this virus. And it's what's known as a protease inhibitor, which aims to prevent viral replication. And these have been very successful in treating HIV and hepatitis C. And this is the kind of drug that Dr. Fauci has been talking about that we need for SARS-CoV-2. Now,
so protease inhibitors do not work, or they are a fake drug, or
what do they do that's positive that's helping these people improve their health condition?
I don't think anything.
Nothing.
Attachment inhibitors represent a novel class of antiretroviral drug. They prevent the initial interaction between the virus and host cell, blocking subsequent viral entry into the cell. The attachment inhibitor binds to the outer domain of HIV-1 GP120 on the viral envelope, just underneath the region for CD4 binding. As GP120 is not able to bind to the CD4 cell, subsequent viral entry is blocked. In summary, attachment inhibitors prevent the first step of viral cell entry, attachment to the CD4 cell membrane.
Cocaine, alcohol, methamphetamine, AZT. What I call a recipe for disaster. That's just shit, hold on. Now these drugs you're doing, they're breaking down your immune system, making you susceptible to infection. You're saying cocaine's scaring your mind? No, I'm saying cocaine made you more susceptible, as did the AZT. AZT's what's happening. The only people AZT helps are the people who sell it. Kills every cell it comes in contact with.
Now, AZT, correct me if I'm wrong, was a cancer medication that was deemed to be too dangerous. They used it for chemotherapy, and they stopped using it because it was killing people, quicker than the cancer.
They still use it somewhat also for chemotherapy. It's not different from any other chemotherapy.
But it's a very, very brutal one.
They're all brutal.
They're all brutal.
They're designed to be brutal. They're designed to kill human cells.
Yeah, and because it's a retrovirus, and a retrovirus copies.
Human cells. Chemotherapy, cancer drugs are designed to kill human cells. And that's what they give them. They give them less and less, so they die.
Well, AZT.
I need to know just exactly what you're pumping into my bloodstream here now.
All right. This is a combination of AZT, and we also got a full spectrum. Don't.
I'm suing you for attempted murder. I say what goes in my body, not you.
That decision, like it or not, is left up to the people in this hospital.
What you think I'm one of your goddamn guinea pigs, Samar? Huh? I look like a rodent to you?
Mr. Woodruff.
Pfizer announcing it is starting a human clinical trial of a pill for COVID-19. This would be an oral antiviral drug targeting this virus. And it's what's known as a protease inhibitor, which aims to prevent viral replication. And these have been very successful in treating HIV.
But they kill the liver and they screw up your metabolism.
I see.
They are not quite as toxic directly as ACT or the DNA chain terminators.
Okay.
But now all of the treatments, antiviral treatments, are cocktails of DNA chain terminators and protease inhibitors. So you get it many ways.
So, doctor, if somebody had HIV...
And guess what the people who take those eventually die from? And it's not so rare. They die 10, 20 years later. The dose is so that they won't die immediately. I think that would be bad even for the pharma companies.
Sure. But isn't that better than, isn't dying 20 years later better than dying 6 months later as HIV did?
That would be better, but was not HIV. There are millions with HIV who have nothing. They're exploding in Africa, the population. There are a million Americans, they're still around. 500,000 Europeans still around. It's what they usually die from, these guys with long-term treatment.
Toxicity probably, right?
Well, they die from pneumonia, from lung disease, kidney disease, and heart disease. And then they get dementia, they get a chemo brain. If you have these chain terminators working in your mitochondria, you become more and more senile very early.
Step over by your vehicle.
But you're saying protease inhibitors actually are toxic and very bad for the body.
And they take the cocktails, usually.
Right.
The typical recipient takes 2 chain terminators and protease inhibitors.
Right. So how are they getting better?
They don't get better. Where's the evidence that they get better? They acknowledge that they never cured anybody with these drugs. Never any cure.
Weeks ago, the FDA advisory panel voting not to recommend booster shots of the Pfizer COVID vaccine for people 16 and older.
Hi, Martha. Well, clearly the committee were extremely frustrated with the insufficient data. This is
not that there were some concerns about inflammation of the heart and whether or not the benefit of receiving the vaccine outweighed the risk of that.
So kids are at higher risk of heart inflammation, myocarditis and pericarditis. Their immune response and inflammatory response is just a lot stronger.
My plan also takes on elected officials in states that are undermining you and these life-saving actions.
Who's going to take the shot? You can be the first one to say, sign me up.
But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
If these governors won't help us beat the pandemic, I'll use my power as president to get them out of the way.
We're here today to make it very clear that we are going to stand for the men and women who are serving us. We're going to protect Florida jobs. We are not going to let people be fired because of a vaccine. You have people who've worked for police, who've worked for fire. They've worked the whole time. While a lot of these politicians were on Zoom and not going out or doing anything, these folks were there protecting us day in and day out. We cannot allow their jobs to be destroyed, and their families and livelihoods potentially to be destroyed as well. And we've seen places like City of Gainesville, some other places around the state that have basically said, we are going to fire you unless you take a vaccine. And these first responders in particular have been exposed to all kinds of, many of them have already had COVID, okay? Let's just be honest. They have had COVID, they've recovered very strong immunity. That's very clear from every study that's been done.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
If these governors won't help us beat the pandemic, I'll use my power as president to get them out of the way. We'll double the fines on travelers that refuse to mask. If you break the rules, be prepared to pay. And by the way, show some respect.
20 years ago, we all found that our lives would be changed forever. And we have seen growing evidence that the dangers to our country can come not only across borders, but from violence that gathers within. There is little cultural overlap between violent extremists abroad and violent extremists at home. But in their disdain for pluralism, in their disregard for human life, in their determination to defile national symbols, they are children of the same foul spirit, and it is our continuing duty to confront them.
This is not going away, everybody. It's not going away. Someone's going to have to explain what happened. There are 75 million people, somewhere around that are flipping out right now because they think their votes were stolen. They think the election was stolen. How is this going to actually come together and not end up in some type of civil war, whether it's a cold civil war, a hot civil war? Something is going to happen here, and it's not just going to go away. And for the mainstream media to do this, shame on you. You owe it to the country. God fucking damn it. New York Times, get...
Republicans had 4 years, and they did nothing about the biggest issue of our time, big tech. The, I guess, sort of tripopoly, for lack of a better word, but the corporate censorship, the foreign interference that can take place. Rules and guidelines that are really important as we go into the next decade. All the tweets, all the hearings, all the subpoenas, nothing was done. As far as big tech is concerned, they are undefeated against Republicans. We are filing a major lawsuit February 1st. I bring this up with Republicans because, you know what? Listen, they're not our friends. I know there's the 11th commandment that Ronald Reagan spoke about, and Andrew Breitbart reiterated to me that you shouldn't speak ill of your fellow conservative. But not all of them wear the team jersey. At what point is it no longer the same team jersey? And we've had conversations with some of these people who hold legislative power behind the scenes and have seen them kowtow because they're afraid of losing maybe their little slice of platform. Well, listen, big tech thinks that they're undefeated because they think that they're untouchable. All the tweets, nothing has happened. Republicans, people don't remember this. I was around when Barack Obama was inaugurated. I was a commentator at Fox News when the Tea Party was started, the rant from Santelli. And I remember Republicans they were painted as the party of no. They were painted as the party, that's what they did, no. And I defended them sometimes. But that criticism was right. It seems that a lot of Republicans would rather be the party of no than actually use their power for good when they have it. And
in early July, I announced the deployment of surge response teams. These are teams comprised of experts from the Department of Health and Human Services, the CDC, the Defense Department, and the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, to areas in the country that need help to stem the spread of COVID-19. Before I close, let me say this. Communities of color are disproportionately impacted by this virus. We will ensure that equity continues to be at the center of our response. Get vaccinated.
We are out here in Kenosha, Wisconsin, in front of one of several structure fires, this one being an office store on the street. The heat is so intense, we're going to go ahead and we're going to walk back this direction. To my left, you can see we're in front of a car lot, which has been completely vandalized by members. And if you actually want to take a look, over here, the correctional facility, as I showed you in our last video, has been completely engulfed in flames. But
you have repeatedly criticized.
I have to answer his statement.
You have repeatedly.
Wait,
you have
no,
you've been talking back and forth.
You made a statement.
I'm asking you.
I would love to end it.
Sir.
I would love to end it.
If you want to switch seats.
We could very quickly.
We could do that, but
I'd send in the National Guard. It would be over. There'd be no problem.
Okay.
But they don't want to accept the National Guard. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem. This is a left-wing. This is a left-wing problem.
White supremacists. Antifa's an idea, not an organization.
Oh, you got it.
Not militia.
Some have cited the metaphor that the president lit the flame. Well, they lit actual flames, actual fires and we
Time
put them out.
expired. There will be order.
Before the rioters tore through that glass, Speaker Pelosi stood at that rostrum and tore through the president's State of the Union speech, inciting anger, resentment, division. Some believe that truly these true colors are being shown now through this divisive partisan impeachment. The Speaker of the House, the Speaker said to us just moments ago, words matter. But apparently those words don't matter when they're uttered by Democrats. When the gentlelady from Massachusetts calls for unrest in the streets.
If you voted for Trump, you voted for the person who the Klan supported. You voted for the person who Nazis support.
I mean, we have eyes, and we know that there are consequences to accepting that version of reality. The consequence is we all get excised and marginalized from the public conversation. And so our answer is no. We are not going to go along with whatever you want us to do, right? That is what is driving so much opposition, because after all, Republicans were in that house too.
I want to be clear in how I characterize this. This is mostly a protest. It is not, generally speaking, unruly.
What you're seeing behind me is one of multiple locations that have been burning in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Some have cited the metaphor that the president lit the flame. Well, they lit actual flames, actual fires, and we put them out.
Expired. There will be order.
Democratic National Committee chair whose new book is Hacks, the inside story of the break-ins and breakdowns that put Donald Trump in the White House, Donna Brazile. First of all, I feel like we spent all of 2017 still stuck in 2016.
I agree.
Can we put the Bernie, Hillary thing aside, that great divide? I mean, that's what all the controversy was with your book, you know, that the elections were, the primaries were rigged, and
You know, that the elections were, the primaries were rigged, and
you know, that the elections were, the primaries were rigged, and
you know, Bill, after a presidential campaign, we should assess what happened. The Republicans did an autopsy report. I assume that the Clinton campaign would do their form of autopsy. But as chair of the Democratic Party, I felt a responsibility to tell my story.
I'll just reiterate that the Democratic National Committee remains neutral in this primary based on our rules. But when I heard what happened at the Nevada State Democratic Convention this weekend, I was deeply disturbed.
And turns out Donna Brazile took over after Debbie Wasserman Schultz as the DNC chair. Remember, Debbie Wasserman Schultz had to resign in shame because the WikiLeaks revealed she was working in collusion with the Hillary Clinton campaign. And then they passed it over to Donna Brazile, who also cheated Bernie Sanders by giving debate questions to the Hillary Clinton campaign and did all the other things. The Saturday morning after the convention in July, I called Gary Gensler, the chief financial officer of Hillary's campaign. He described the party as fully under the control of Hillary's campaign, which seemed to confirm the suspicions of the Bernie camp. Seemed?
And I concur with 100% of what you just said about how their behavior is nefarious and undermines exactly what we deserve in our country, democracy.
For the first time in my adult lifetime, I'm really proud of my country. And not just because Barack has done well, but because I think people are hungry for change.
This new Democratic Party is about. We're proud as hell to be Democrats. We're willing to fight for the ideals of the Democratic Party. We're proud of our history. We're proud of our present, and we're proud of the future that we can create for this country. And we're not in this just to make a statement. We're in this to win.
Yeah. I want to be clear in how I characterize this. This is mostly a protest. It is not, generally speaking, unruly.
What you're seeing behind me is one of multiple locations that have been burning in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
I argue to you tonight, all punches are not equal morally.
That ain't a riot, what we're seeing right now in Minneapolis. They are strictly principled anti-fascists, and they've taken a principled stand to stand against white supremacists and white nationalists wherever they may show up.
It says it right in the name, Antifa, anti-fascism, which is what they were there fighting. Listen, there's, no organization is perfect. There was some violence.
Any reasonable person would say we shouldn't be destroying other people's property, but these are not reasonable times.
But thank goodness for the looters, man.
And please, show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
I don't care that much about statues.
Shouldn't that be done by a commission or the city council, not a mob in the middle of the night throwing it into the harbor?
People will do what they do.
Most of the major movements in American history have started at the grassroots level and at some point have turned into direct conflict with American government. So remember your history before you judge your present.
Do not get it twisted and think that, oh, this is something that has never happened before, and then this is so terrible, and where are we, and these savages and all of that. This is how this country was started.
People get mad and people get sick of it. People are risking COVID to explain to this country that we're fed up.
Thuggishness is thuggishness wherever it comes from politically, and we should be the first to call it out.
I disagree.
When it comes to the unity of America, those days seem distant from our own. Malign force seems at work in our common life that turns every disagreement into an argument, and every argument into a clash of cultures. So much of our politics has become a naked appeal to anger, fear, and resentment. That leaves us worried about our nation and our future together.
Am I reading this right? When he talks about defiling national symbols, is he talking about the January 6th insurrectionists, the MAGA terrorists?
Hatred of pluralism and diversity that the U.S. represents is a connective tissue from 9/11 to 1/6. So I thought that was important. And we, those of us in counterterrorism, believe that to be true. If we underestimated al-Qaeda on September 10th, do not underestimate this threat in America right now. And that's essentially what the former president of the United States was saying about him and a former president from his party.
And just the former president, Garrett, was very clearly saying that there is a domestic terrorist threat from within. They might not have the same ideology. White supremacists or far-right extremists are not the same as Al-Qaeda or ISIS, but they don't like pluralism. They want to attack national symbols.
It's impossible to disentangle the ideology of January 6th from the political forces unleashed inside the United States after 9/11.
As a result.
That the anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, nativist, nationalist politics that we have seen really come to the fore of a lot of Republican politics these days, sort of power a lot of the MAGA movement. So that I think that there is a very straight line that you can draw from the U.S. response to 9/11 to the insurrection on January 6th.
There is little cultural overlap between violent extremists abroad and violent extremists at home in their determination to defile national symbols. They are children of the same foul spirit, and it is our continuing duty to confront them.
Everybody took this as a critique of the 1/6 rioters. Now, it's possible to read it as a broader critique than that, right? That he's talking about white supremacists, or that he's talking about Antifa, or that he's talking about Black Lives Matter. The problem is, of course, that he released a statement in favor of Black Lives Matter last June, in which he talked about systemic American racism and all of the rest of the left-wing buzzwords. To compare those people still to the 9/11 hijackers who literally murdered 3,000 Americans, okay, that is not remotely the same thing as the 9/11 hijackers. They didn't believe in elections. They believe in full-on Sharia law, right? They wanted the kind of governance that you see in Afghanistan. The comparison fails on nearly every level.
And many people argue that this pandemic was a plandemic, that it was planned from the outset, that it's part of a sinister scheme. I can't tell you the answer to that. I don't have enough evidence. A lot of it feels very planned to me.
We have a golden opportunity to seize something good from this crisis. Its unprecedented shockwaves may well make people more receptive to big visions of change. And global crises like pandemics and climate change know no borders and highlight just how interdependent we are as one people sharing one planet. Over the past month or so, despite the ongoing crisis, I've been encouraged to see the growing calls for a green recovery. We need only look to the United Nations Secretary General, to the IMF, the EU, the Petersburg Climate Dialogue, the Canadian government, the COP26 Universities Network, and business leaders around the world to see this.
That the COVID-19 pandemics just has accelerated certain trends which we had seen before and which actually were discussed in Davos this year, like the lack of inclusion, the lack of paying sufficient attention to the environment. So what we will see now is acceleration of those trends, and of course, a unique opportunity to reset our global agenda.
This pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset. This is our chance to accelerate our pre-pandemic efforts to reimagine economic systems that actually address global challenges like extreme poverty, inequality, and climate change.
So now the Economic Forum is talking about the Great Reset. And I just want to read to you what they've been, what they're up to. No jobs, few crops, coronavirus, and pests leave Nepal fearing hunger. How Europe can emerge stronger out of the coronavirus. Although some people have been warning us, like Bill Gates in his 2015 TED Talk, we were underprepared. Unfortunately, it often takes a tragedy to respond in a coordinated, divisive way. Just like my country, the Netherlands, experienced in 1953 when the dikes broke. We know that the world will spend trillions of dollars on repairing our economies from this disaster through debt relief programs. Oh, really? They're going to relieve our debt? Income support programs, fiscal stimuli, and other interventions. It would be a wasted opportunity then only to focus on a restart. Part of these trillions has got to go to reset and reform our societies instead of simply restart.
Our nation is going through a crisis which threatens its very future as free and democratic. The worldwide spread of Marxist materialism, which has already brought destruction and death to the lives of so many, and which has threatened the foundations of our nation for decades, and now seems to seize the governing power over our nation.
Now they have a source of fear that is the most pervasive and all-encompassing power that they've ever had, which is the fear of pandemics.
I think it's worth, first of all, remembering, and I know that you remember I started writing about politics in 2005, so I do, how liberals used to be overflowing with so much hatred and contempt for George Bush. They frequently compared him to Adolf Hitler, claimed his family was crucial to the rise of the Nazi Party, claimed something I agree with, that he's a war criminal who belongs at The Hague, said he was so filled with racism that he purposely allowed New Orleans to drown because so many black people live there.
George Bush doesn't care about black people.
And every liberal I know believes that George Bush stole at least one election and maybe even two, both in 2000 and 2004.
Good evening. Just moments ago, I spoke with George W. Bush and congratulated him on becoming the 43rd President of the United States. Now the U.S. Supreme Court has spoken. Let there be no doubt, while I strongly disagree with the court's decision, I accept it. I accept the finality of this outcome, which will be ratified next Monday in the Electoral College. And tonight, for the sake of our unity as a people and the strength of our democracy, I offer my concession.
But this weekend, it turned into this love fest. I mean, they dripped with effusive praise for him because what he said there, that essentially the 9/11 attacks that he was there to commemorate are the same as the 3-hour riot on January 6th. And more importantly, that the people who did 9/11, Al-Qaeda, are similar or identical to kind of the same foul spirit, as he put it, Trump supporters, essentially, and that they ought to be treated the same. A war on terror against Al-Qaeda, now a domestic war on terror against your fellow citizens, is music to the ears of American liberals because they want nothing more than a new domestic war on terror.
You guys know Bill Maher. He is sort of the last remaining liberal, I suppose, and he talked on his show this week about why he's always hitting the left. And I was just like, man, I've just sort of had it with these last liberals. Like these last liberals who are still pretending that they can't figure out what time it is as the world burns. Anyway, the point is, when Trump was the one that was doing Operation Warp Speed and we're going to get everybody vaccinated and everything else.
It's called Operation Warp Speed.
That means big and it means fast. A massive scientific, industrial, and logistical. Its objective is to finish developing and then to manufacture and distribute a proven coronavirus vaccine as fast as possible. Again, we'd love to see if we could do it prior to the end of the year.
Kamala Harris, I don't trust it. I don't trust Trump. Joe Biden, who would trust this? It has to be transparent. Is that it's never going to stop. And they're just going to keep coming. And if you don't think so, well, here's Fauci now talking about mandating that everyone who gets on a plane should have to wear a mask.
I would support that. If you want to get on a plane and travel with other people, that you should be vaccinated. When you hear us say, should you mandate vaccination for children to be able to attend school, but we already do that.
They're not dying. Young people have immunity. Healthy people have immunity. We never talk about stop being a fat fuck and eat right and take care of yourself and try medicine, try eating right, not drinking all the time, not taking drugs, not abusing yourself, and you might be okay. Your immunity might be okay. Notice how they've also changed the language. It was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Now it's quite literally almost 2 years later. It's over a year and a half later.
Can flatten the curve, which is a term that you've been hearing a lot, not overwhelm our healthcare systems.
That's a surge of cases, so you need to stretch it out.
Self-quarantine for 14 days.
Stay at home as much as possible.
Stay home.
Stay home.
People should not be walking around with masks. And the fundamentals are not rocket science. It's universal wearing of masks.
Masks are very important.
For me, it's easy because I have a lot of masks.
This is okay. Just try to focus on the positive.
Wear a mask.
Wear a mask all the time.
And if you don't, you are a selfish mother-ass.
You put another layer on, it just makes common sense.
2 masks are indeed better than 1.
Double masking, as it's called.
A 3-layer mask could block up to 90%.
The thing that'll get us back is the vaccine.
No miracle is coming.
We have delivered a safe and effective vaccine in just 9 months.
We have to do a double dose, right?
You have had your second vaccine shot.
If we do our part, by July the 4th, there's a good chance you will be able to get together in your backyard and have a cookout and a barbecue and celebrate Independence Day.
To me, when people say to me sometimes like, boy, you go after the left a lot these days. Why? I'm like, because you're embarrassing me. Because you're inverting things that I'm not going to give up on being liberal. This is what these teachers are talking about, that you're taking children and making them hyper aware of race in a way they wouldn't otherwise be. Colleges sometimes now many of them have different graduation ceremonies for black and white, separate dorms. This is what I mean, segregation. You've inverted the idea.
And we see this with all the liberals. A guy like Joe Rogan, for example.
If you go to the knee-jerk conservative reaction, you talk to people who are not interested in anyone that wants to be a democratic socialist. They hear the name Bernie Sanders. The negative implications are that you are somehow or another going to take their money, right? Is that annoying to you?
Yes, it is. Of course it is. And also that I'm Mr. Maduro, I'm a dictator, I love dictatorships and all that stuff.
It makes no sense to be a Bernie supporter. You sit down with people like Jordan Peterson and all these brilliant people for years and years and years, and at the end, when it came down to it for the presidency, you were supporting Bernie Sanders. Makes no sense. But Joe Rogan, when he signed the $100 million deal, which I'm told is a lot more than $100 million with Spotify, he lived in California.
I mean, I got a lot of offers to buy half of the podcast or to buy, and I'll never do it. But then Spotify came along and they said, we'll give you a licensing deal. So just put it on our network, but you still own it. Right. I'm like, all right, we're in.
You know what he did right before he signed the deal? He left. He went to Texas.
So the most recent solution was to jack up taxes to 54%. I'm like, you guys are out of your fucking mind. Retroactively, back to January.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it was a proposal. It's crazy. It's not going to fix it. They're bankrupt. This state is bankrupt because they're incompetent. They're not going to become competent if you give them more money. And the place is still fucked up.
But the thing that he was telling everybody to vote for, that he's voting for, Bernie Sanders, was to raise taxes on everybody, especially people like him. So the liberals, in this sense, they're all still confused. They're looking at their watch, and a watch should be right twice a day, but they can't seem to ever get it right. So it's like Bill Maher take the last step here. If you keep saying that everybody else, the conservatives, they're always racist and bigots and backwards, and in Bill's case, they're also believers, right? They're believers, they're religious, so they must be idiots. I saw even that Sam Harris.
Liberals need to stand up for liberal principles. But all I'm saying is that liberal principles like freedom of speech, freedom to practice any religion you want without fear of violence, freedom to leave a religion, equality for women, equality for minorities, including homosexuals. These are liberal principles that liberals applaud for. But then when you say in the Muslim world, this is what's lacking, then they get upset.
I would argue that liberals have failed us. And
while I was gone off the grid, that he basically tweeted out something to the effect of he's swallowing his words related to supporting Biden. It's like, yeah, we all knew this was going to happen, but you guys were so afraid of being called scary conservatives. So you'd rather vote to destroy everything that America is. So you can't support Adam Schiff. You can't tell people to vote for Bernie Sanders. You can't sit there as the world burns and your entire side has collapsed and go, you're making liberals look bad. It's like, no, liberals made liberals look bad, right?
Over on Fox, human manure spreader Tucker Carlson has floated yet another race-baiting conspiracy theory that tens of thousands of Afghan refugees are being welcomed into this country in order to change the outcome of future elections. We had an insurrection nearly 8 months ago. An insurrection that, let's face it, hasn't really ended, in part because you have Republican members of Congress using this kind of rhetoric.
If our election systems continue to be rigged and continue to be stolen, then it's going to lead to one place, and it's bloodshed. And I will tell you, as much as I'm willing to defend our liberty at all costs, there's nothing that I would dread doing more than having to pick up arms against a fellow American.
The leaders of this MAGA ban movement, sort of like an American Taliban.
Jim Acosta has come out many times and said that Trump and his supporters are liars, that CNN is not an enemy of the American people. No, they just support the end of the country. They support Antifa. They support lies. They support sending sick people to nursing homes to kill them en masse. They defended Cuomo doing that. You know the crimes of CNN run by Ted Turner, the depopulationist globalist that actually runs this whole thing with the late David Rockefeller's foundation, along with Bill Gates. And so here he is with the Communist News Network saying leading figures on the far right have been sounding the alarm on Afghanistan evacuees all week. The refugees are coming. Refugees are coming, Acosta said. Yeah, a bunch of them are terrorists. Over on Fox, human manure spreader Tucker Carlson has floated yet another race-baiting conspiracy theory that tens of thousands of Afghan refugees are being sent over to this country in order to change the outcomes of the elections. Yeah, they're sending them all to battleground states, like the Somalis. Some members of the far right in this country have apparently decided they will resort to intimidation and in some cases even violence to get what they want. Now, that's the Democrats burning down cities. Sound familiar? Sort of like American Taliban, Acosta said. It's starting to look like a combination of theocracy and thugocracy. He wanted to say these people are the new Taliban. No, you guys are fighting the Taliban. You're the ones shipping them into the country. You're the ones protecting them and censoring people that criticize Orthodox and radical Islam. So here's Acosta. Here's Michael Moore saying, bring our troops home, he said 2 weeks ago, because we need them for the January 6 people and the insurrectionists and the terrorists and all the rest of it. They burned down all these cities, billions of dollars in damage.
I'm in the middle of writing something today for my Substack. The headline is, in the end, Bin Laden won, and we helped him do it. He didn't understand the genius, the evil genius of Bin Laden was to draw us over there and lose not only thousands of our young men and women in battle. They had to get us to come over there, and they knew Bush and his enablers were just that stupid. That we would send our troops over there and that we would spend $300 million a day for 20 years. But if you look at it in the fact that he knew something about us, that we would demolish our own democracy. We would pass a Patriot Act. We would do things to reduce our freedoms. He didn't have to do it. We actually passed legislation to do this. The fact that it almost makes him look like a mad genius that he knew that we would take away our own rights, that we would divide ourselves so viciously against each other. But the fact that we spent trillions of dollars of our money instead of taking care of our own people who suffered during this time. You know, so if you look at it like that with the macro lens, it kind of looks like we defeated ourselves, and all he did was strike the match.
And it's wrong. And I just want you to keep that in mind. How many times have you heard the politicians in the last year or two talk about sovereignty? They don't talk about it, do they? For that matter, when's the last time you heard a national politician refer to the republic? They don't talk about that much either, do they? And while we're here, let's stop and briefly and let's explain what I'm talking about here. Oh, all they talk about is democracy. Democracy. God save democracy. We love democracy. The terrorists hate democracy. Well, what is democracy? Democracy is ruled by the majority. What's the primary example of democracy in action? A lynch mob. Okay? Everybody says lynch him, so they do. Folks, this is not what we were handed by our ancestors. This was never intended to be a pure democracy. What we are supposed to have in this country, with its Constitution, its Bill of Rights, is a democratic republic. Now, what's the difference? In a pure democracy, the lynch mob. Lynch him, okay? You string him up. In a democratic republic, you have to go through a system of laws, checks and balances, courtroom procedure. You have to give the guy a fair trial. There are certain procedures and laws that you have to follow. He has the right to meet his accuser. He has the right to defense. He has the right to cross-examine the evidence and the witnesses against him. And then if he's found guilty, then you can hang him. Okay? That's what we're supposed to have. They are stripping the liberties that we are guaranteed in this country. And it really is amazing to me, because if Osama bin Laden was indeed behind the 9/11 attacks, and there's still been no real proof that he is, but if he was, and if his goal was to destroy a democracy and to end our freedoms, he succeeded, hadn't he? But we know that some bearded guy over in a cave somewhere is not responsible for everything that's going on in the world today.
One of the things that we learned after the storming of the Capitol was our institutions held.
I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. We destroyed the Taliban, many terrorists, and the camps where they trained. It's important for Americans to know this war will not be quick, and this war will not be easy. We know this from not only intelligence, but from the history of military conflict in Afghanistan. It's been one of initial success, followed by long years of floundering and ultimate failure. We're not going to repeat that mistake. For all the good work we've done in that country, it is clear we must do even more. I'm announcing today additional American troop deployments to Afghanistan.
Iran is not Iraq, and Iraq is not Iran. I know that. If we can get one democracy going in one of these places, Iran, Iraq, believe me, Reagan was right. It's going to spread to all these countries. Because people want freedom.
When you make threats, sir, you have to back them up. Now, you'd be committing us to planning out 3 fully operational wars with 3 countries.
Now, I'm not saying war. I'm saying lay down the law. How are you going to contain 100,000 of these lunatics running around the world with fake passports from country to country looking for nukes, anthrax?
And I'm sure you realize it wasn't Iran or Iraq who attacked us. It was Osama bin Laden.
But you know as well as I do that there's more than one bunch of terrorists out there than a religious nut in a cave in Pakistan. Well then, we'll go with axis of evil.
Yes, Mr. President.
And now I'm tired of this.
One of the most worrisome things that emerges from the thick intelligence file we have on Iraq's biological weapons is the existence of mobile production facilities used to make biological agents. Let me take you inside that intelligence file and share with you what we know from eyewitness accounts. We wrote 1441 not in order to go to war. We wrote 1441 to give Iraq one last chance.
It was here, in Afghanistan, where Osama bin Laden established a safe haven for his terrorist organization. And so 10 years ago, the United States and our allies went to war to make sure that al-Qaeda could never again use this country to launch attacks against us. Despite initial success, for a number of reasons, this war has taken longer than most anticipated.
Our cover was coronavirus, 106 dead in China, 1.4 billion still alive. You know, what are you telling me this for? I'll tell you why. Because they couldn't stop the Hong Kong protests.
On a Hong Kong side street, the police were still chasing the protesters. The officers jumping out of vans to tackle whoever they could catch. In some cases, violently. Mayhem keeping its momentum. It was the end of an ugly day, with street battles that turned into brawls and seemed to go on forever.
7.5 million people. 7.5 million people in Hong Kong. 1 million were taking to the streets. You can't get 1 million people in America out of 332 million to do anything. What happened? The virus broke out. Security law enacted. Protests are over. China in charge. And the world became Chinese.
What does
they
it
make
end?
up crap. They didn't teach me about in economics 101 about quantitative easing and zero and negative interest rate policy. They make this stuff up.
Last month, Bernanke announced the Fed's intent to buy $600 billion in U.S. Treasury securities, which is supposed to have the effect of lowering rates on long-term loans for things like cars and homes.
What did you see that caused you to pull the trigger on the $600 billion at this point?
It has to do with two aspects. The first is unemployment. The other concern I should mention is that inflation is very, very low, which you think is a good thing and normally is a good thing. But we're getting awfully close to the range where prices would actually start falling.
Falling prices lead to falling wages. It lets the steam out of the economy and you start spiraling downward.
Exactly.
Yes, it has to collapse. And I'm still bullish on gold and silver because they're going to all go digital like they're doing in China already with the yuan. So they know every penny you spent, where you spent it, how you spent it, what you spent it on, so they can get the money in the name of taxes.
Well, the Fed coin is another surveillance capitalism. They're going to keep track of everything you do.
Here's my greatest fear. When all else fails, they take you to war. George Carlin, you say it's one big club and you ain't in it. The dot-com busts happened in March of 2000. We're in a deep recession going into 2001 when Bush is in office. All of a sudden, 9/11, the Afghan war, and the whole new scheme began. So when all else fails, they take you to war.
See, what happened was I was writing a book called The Infinite Return, and then on September 17, 2019, the repo market blew up. And then COVID appeared. And then you're saying that COVID appeared also to quell the riots in Hong Kong? Basically, I flew for the Marine Corps. We were taught ABC, atomic, biological, chemical warfare.
There you
so
go.
is COVID B, biological warfare?
Yes. I mean, look, they locked down Australia. 25 million people.
Riot police and anti-lockdown protesters are tonight still playing a game of cat and mouse. And
to make it into the city, past blocked roads and checkpoints, were met by 1,400 officers here on the streets of Melbourne too. The central city overrun with protesters, defying stay-at-home orders and clashing with police. Officers appearing to be overwhelmed by the sheer number of people.
They are out attending parties. They are out doing what they've been told not to do. They're facilitating the spread of the virus. And I would just say to them, you are ransoming our future.
How many deaths? Under 1,000 over 17 months. 86 people died this year out of 25 million. What are you locking it down for?
Are you saying, I was watching those Hong Kong riots, but you're saying, was that part of the reason that COVID appeared?
I believe so. They could not stop them. The people would not stop it. It stopped like that. There were protests going on in South Africa, Lebanon, France, Algeria, Colombia, Chile, Bolivia, Peru, India, all over the world. Poverty, lack of basic living standards, violence, government corruption, and crime. They couldn't stop these. Every week, people, boom, COVID comes, no more protests, it's over. It's over. It's to keep the maniacs in charge that are robbing the people of their rights in charge. And they suck up and bow down to the people that pay them off, that morons and imbeciles call campaign contributions. Look at how the FDA just allegedly approved the virus drug, right? Who was the head of the FDA under the Trump administration? Oh, by a guy by the name of Scott Gottlieb. Hey, where's Scotty now? Oh, he's on the board of directors of Pfizer.
Critics of the revolving door between Washington and the private sector are going to say, you know what, maybe he wasn't tough enough on the drug companies.
This new role at Pfizer clearly is a bigger role than what I did before I came into the FDA. It's something I'm very proud of, something where I think I can make a lot of contributions over time.
What am I, 6 years old? Who the hell are you talking to? You got the guy that's running the FDA on the board of directors of Pfizer. Grow up.
I demand that someone show me your commander.
Our ancestors built this wall, using ancient stones from the bosom of Greece herself.
You will pay for your barbarism!
Go now. Tell your Xerxes he faces free men here.
But in Britain, the health minister is not betting on future lockdowns to quash Delta. The minister also announcing a U-turn on vaccine passports, ruling out their use to allow people to attend crowded events.
We've looked at it properly, and whilst we should keep it in reserve as a potential option, I'm pleased to say that we will not be going ahead with plans for vaccine passports.
A number of countries, including Sweden, are temporarily halting the use of Johnson & Johnson's Janssen vaccine. Now, Denmark has also become the first country to completely halt the use of the AstraZeneca vaccine.
The Swedish Public Health Agency has put a hold on Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine. Also on Wednesday, Denmark became the first country in the world to completely halt the use of AstraZeneca vaccine over a reported link to a serious form of blood clot.
Now, Moderna says several batches of its COVID-19 vaccine sent to Japan were tainted with stainless steel particles. Moderna is facing major setbacks in Japan, with hundreds of thousands of doses suspended for use following reports of foreign matter detected in their vials.
A lot of Americans are, what's the word I'm looking for? Crazy. We have a lot of crazy people here. A new line of lunacy from anti-vaccination is called the Magnet Challenge. Have you heard of this? This is a number of thick-armed conspiracy theorists have taken to social media to claim that since they got vaccinated, their arm now has magnetic properties at where they were, presumably because of the microchip that was implanted when they got the shot.
And there it is.
Come closer.
Stick into my arm. That's where I got the shot.
And here's the magnet on the arm. I didn't get the shot. You go figure it out. We're chipped. We're all.
What makes these people think anyone is interested enough in them to track them? Where could that woman possibly be going? She just left Walmart. She's en route to Joann Fabric.
You would lead us with your geography and your maps and your spelling, even though
your math and your reading.
Yeah, you're reading. You know, your geography, knowing other countries, sipping your latte.
All those lines on the map.
There are no limits.
It figures it would be something like this.
So we call it actually a vaccine certificate rather than a vaccine passport, Brian. The idea is that you'd have a fact about you that you've been vaccinated associated with your face. And anytime you wanted to gain access, say, to a ball game or premises, you would just authenticate your face, and that would show that you were the rightful owner of a vaccine certificate. The great thing about this approach is there's no PII other than your face involved. You don't need to hand over your name and your date of birth. Don't need to show ID.
Apple has suspended a highly conservative social media app after it failed to prevent the spread of posts inciting violence. The service had been given a 24-hour warning to submit a moderation plan.
The International Monetary Fund is reportedly lobbying to use individuals' online web histories to set your credit score.
The IMF wants to get their buddies at big tech in on the action. According to Gizmodo, the researchers want to use the data from your browsing, search, and purchase history to create a more accurate mechanism for determining the credit rating of an individual. Imagine going to your bank to take out a mortgage for a couple paying for their first home. And the account manager is able to know your political beliefs, your religious beliefs, your most recent purchases online, even your random internet search history. All of this represents a bigger and much more powerful reach of these institutions into the lives of the consumer, the American people.
COVID-19 continues to spread around the globe. You can help stop COVID-19 by participating in contact tracing. How does contact tracing work? Contact tracing is a system that has been used for decades to stop infectious diseases. A contact is anyone who has had direct physical contact or was within 1 meter for at least 15 minutes with an infected person, even if that person does not have symptoms.
So, what is contact tracing? How effective is it? And how do we implement it? But oftentimes, contact tracing is not so simple. People typically don't keep detailed logs of everyone they've been near all the time, and our memories are imperfect. A subset of people may just plain not want to comply. Or the original infected person might not want to cooperate and reveal who they've been in contact with. Still, leveraging technology could help contact tracers cast a bigger net. Recently, Google and Apple announced that they would be building a similar feature directly into their mobile operating systems and are hoping to launch it by mid-May.
First time, Google and Apple will be shipping their contact tracing software. Just getting off the press call with both Apple and Google, they say that multiple states here in the U.S. have expressed interest, and 22 countries on 5 continents have also expressed interest in using the software as well.
Apple and Google, the global duopoly of mobile operating systems, are building a mass surveillance system that will be remotely introduced into every connected iPhone and Android device in the world. This is one of those good intentions that's paving our way into a dystopian mass surveillance future, much like the Patriot Act has been doing since 9/11. We need to have a serious discussion about measures that will fundamentally alter the way we live our modern lives. Complacency and blind trust in authorities is the worst thing we can do in times of this crisis. This new contact tracing technology, currently under development by Apple and Google, requires some serious investigation. So in effect, no smartphone user have the ability to express consent upon forced API updates. There will be no voting on this, no public discourse, no debate. Just 2 tech giants and the government making decisions about lives of hundreds of millions of people.
Connecticut Department of Public Health is working with Microsoft to launch an initiative called Contact. They hope to launch it over the next month. The program is geared toward increasing contact tracing in our state.
Well, contact tracing is something that we've done for a really long time to fight off infectious diseases, including the measles, But now the process is going to be automated. So instead of these folks having to call up people, they can just do it in an automated process. It's online, and it's going to put all of our local health departments on one page.
Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation. Now, according to Gates, the only way to responsibly end the shutdowns and stay-at-home orders is for a pretty vast surveillance system to be put in place. Writing in the Washington Post, the United States can follow Germany's example, interview everyone who tests positive, and use a database to make sure someone follows up with all their contacts. He notes that some people have proposed allowing phones to detect other phones that are near them by using Bluetooth and emitting sounds that humans can't hear. And if someone tested positive, their phone would send a message to other phones, and their owners could, go get tested. Well, how this information would be stored, whether it would be stored, and to whom it would be accessible, I mean, it's anyone's guess. We don't know any of this yet.
We have a lot of crazy people here.
Governor Greg Abbott signed an executive order to ban government-mandated so-called vaccine passports here in Texas.
The fight over vaccine passport rages across the country. 12 states are currently banning or limiting vaccine passports. You're worried that people will be discriminated against based on whether or not they've had the vaccine.
Look, that's exactly right. Listen, I think vaccines are terrific. I've had the vaccine myself. I think it's given us a lot of freedom. But I think there's a real potential for government overreach. And I don't believe anyone should be forced to take the vaccine. It should be your personal choice. You should make the choice based on your health, based on the decisions you want. And so I've introduced this week legislation that would, number one, prohibit any federal vaccine passport, prohibit the Biden administration from doing anything to mandate vaccines, but it also prohibits discrimination in employment. We're seeing some places where employers are saying, if you're not vaccinated, you're fired, and that ought to be illegal.
And we have to stop saying, oh, well, you have to listen to people, and no, you don't. These people are being harmful to the greater good. You don't have to listen to a minority of people who are being harmful to the greater good and who are not acting on logic, reason, and science.
Yes, science! Don't forget to smash that subscribe button.
Can work through a whole pandemic with no vaccine. Brave. God will forgive me. Because I'm being forced to do this.
Got the COVID vaccine because she wanted to see life in Canada get back to normal. But the Toronto woman wasn't prepared for what she saw when she looked in the mirror 2 weeks after getting her AstraZeneca shot.
In the morning, I was just looking and I thought, gosh, something is weird with my face. And I thought, whatever, I slept funny, no big deal.
A phone consult with Gibson's doctor confirmed that she had developed Bell's palsy, a form of facial paralysis.
So honestly, when they said Bell's palsy, it's, devastating to look at half your face being paralyzed, but...
Why are we not talking about natural immunities?
It should not be forced upon us to either vaccinate or lose our livelihood.
We do not consent!
Give us our right to say no.
In a recent Gallup survey, Democrats did much worse than Republicans in getting the right answer to the fundamental question, what are the chances that someone who gets COVID will need to be hospitalized? The answer is between 1% and 5%. 41% of Democrats thought it was over 50%, and also have a greatly exaggerated view of the danger of COVID too, and the mortality rate among children.
And so if you want to attack me for being overly emotional, but am I saying that I'm better than you? Yeah, I'm fucking better than you, okay? Much better than you. You are garbage. You're garbage. And you can call me a social justice warrior. You can call me whatever the fuck you want. At this point, I don't give a shit. I'd rather be a social justice warrior than a piece of fucking shit.
All of which explains why today the states with the highest share of schools that are still closed are all blue states.
I pledge allegiance to the queers.
Shouldn't liberal media have to answer for, how did your audience wind up believing such a bunch of crap about COVID? Texas lifted its COVID restrictions recently, and their infection rates went down, in part because of people getting outside, should let the sun and wind do their thing. But to many liberals, that can't be right. Because Texas and beach-loving Florida have Republican governors. But apparently the governor is also a voracious consumer of the scientific literature. And maybe that's why he protected his most vulnerable population, the elderly, way better than did the governor of New York. Those are just facts. I know it's irresponsible of me to say them. Look, here's what I'm saying. I don't want politics mixed in with my medical decisions.
From a year ago, Dr. Fauci said that if hospitals get any more overcrowded, they're going to have to make some very tough choices about who gets an ICU bed. That choice doesn't seem so tough to me. Vaccinated person having a heart attack? Yes, come right on in. We'll take care of you. Unvaccinated guy who gobbled horse goo? Rest in peace, Wheezy. You're
hilarious.
That's sick.
Cheering for people's deaths. So funny. Great humor.
We must increase vaccinations among the unvaccinated with new vaccination requirements. This is not about freedom or personal choice.
The rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism that we must confront and we will defeat.
You're okay. This one, real fucking ugly. Oh, you see, I take these glasses off. She looks like a regular person, doesn't she, huh? Put them back on, formaldehyde face. That's what.
But on a serious note, though, Australia is almost like a blueprint for what America could be.
Here's why it's not. Because for a long time, all of us heard from all of our Facebook friends, we should give up our guns, look at Australia. Australia gave up our guns, look at Australia, they're the model, we should follow suit. And now everyone who is even slightly in favor of gun rights looks at Australia and is going out and buying an entire arsenal. So what is happening in Australia right now has settled the gun issue in America permanently, because people who are in favor of gun rights are no longer interested in having a conversation. They understand this is being done in bad faith, and instead of sitting down and trying to argue on social media, they're saying, oh, you have your opinion? Cool. I'm going to head to the store, stock up on guns and ammo, and we're not going to talk about this any further. And the best answer to gun control legislation isn't other legislation, it's gun proliferation. And that's exactly what's happening in America, and this is why I have so much more hope for America than I do for your prison colony.
And I want to find a solution, and I want to win, and I want to take this shit back fast. And so, you know what? I will work with someone who's a little cringy or something if they're going to win and they're going to do what it takes. Because just because you're based and you have all the right views and you say all the right things doesn't mean that you have the balls to actually go and put your life on the line and do something.
One of the things that you personally saw is something I've been, another anarchist argued for a long time, is the conservative slogan, which is a complete lie, that if you haven't done anything wrong, you have nothing to fear from the police, right? You hear this all the time about when people on the left historically have argued for like Miranda rights and more protections for the accused. Like, you just let them in your house, you haven't done anything wrong, you have nothing to fear from the police. Now, doing something wrong is selling a meal to another person or giving them a massage or a haircut. And you yourself saw what happened, is having conservatives realize that you do not back the blue does not back you, that without the police, whatever Nancy Pelosi and Governor Cuomo and Governor Whitmer want is just peace, like letters to Santa, without men and women in badges willing to impose those unlawful edicts onto the rest of us. And I think turning conservatives against the police and against corporate America, which is happening at a very quick rate, is something that's going to be very helpful for the future. Now that the hard left has brought defund the police into the mainstream, there's going to be right-wing alternatives, which is to have things like more of an armed population and less of a centralized police force and options like that.
So tonight, I'm announcing that the Department of Labor is developing an emergency rule to require all employers with 100 or more employees to ensure their workforces are fully vaccinated. The bottom line, we're going to protect vaccinated workers from unvaccinated coworkers. I want to emphasize that the vaccines provide very strong protection from severe illness from COVID-19. The vaccine requirements in my plan will affect about 100 million Americans. We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin.
I had an issue, I told you, Chris, when my family was here, and they were saying, well, I don't know, I said, you know how you got here to visit me in New York? You took an airplane. What is that? Science.
Yes, science! Don't forget to smash that subscribe button.
Right? You know why people live to be older than 40, 50, 60 years old these days? Science.
Yes, science! Don't forget to smash that subscribe button.
You're going to question the vaccine, but you want to take a horse dewormer.
Joe Rogan, an extremely popular podcaster, announced on social media today that he has COVID. On media, Rogan said he has taken several therapeutics to recover.
Turns out I got COVID. So we immediately threw the kitchen sink at it. All kinds of meds, monoclonal antibodies, ivermectin, Z-Pak, prednisone, everything.
And ivermectin is something more often used to deworm horses. CDC says there's no evidence it works on COVID. Its increased usage has only led to a substantial increase in overdoses after a push by some on the far right, citing vaccine misinformation.
So this was the story that the Rolling Stone went with. It says gunshot victims left waiting as horse dewormer overdoses overwhelm Oklahoma hospitals, doctors say. Now, you see what that is? That they get to dunk on a red state and Trump voters and ivermectin, which is now a generic drug, so nobody can make money off it. Anybody can manufacture it. And I just want to let you know that story was complete bogus. That was an untrue story, 100%. There were no gunshot victims left waiting, and there were nobody in their ICUs that had taken horse dewormer overdoses. Both of those things were completely made up.
And ivermectin is something more often used to deworm horses. CDC says there's no evidence it works on COVID. Its increased usage has only led to a substantial increase in overdoses after a push by some on the far right, citing vaccine misinformation.
And how do I know it? Because, well, somebody reached out to the hospital, and this is from the hospital, message from the administration of Northeastern Health System, Sequoia. So there was an interview by a guy named Dr. Jason McLeod, and he's the one who asserted all this stuff, and then it just got repeated, and nobody fact-checked it.
You're going to question the vaccine, but you want to take a horse dewormer.
So although this is from the hospital, although Dr. Jason McLeod is not an employee of NHS Sequoia, he is affiliated with the medical staffing group that provides coverage for our emergency room. With that said, Dr. McLeod has not worked at our Salsa location in over 2 months. NHS Sequoia has not treated any patient due to complications related to taking ivermectin. This includes not treating any patients for ivermectin overdose. Nobody was even, not one person. All patients who have visited our emergency room have received medical attention as appropriate. Our hospital has not had to turn away any patients seeking emergency care. This is exactly like Russiagate, in that journalists are allowed to make stuff up out of whole cloth, be wildly unethical, and flat out lie to their audiences as long as your lies push establishment narratives and you are dunking on a red state or Trump.
Putin, Russia hates Russia, Putin, Russia, Moscow, Russian, pro-Russian, the Russians, Moscow.
And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
That wants to think that Donald Trump's a smart one, and y'all elitists are dumb.
You elitists with your geography and your maps and your spelling.
Ivermectin is something more often used to deworm horses.
Right? You know why people live to be older than 40, 50, 60 years old these days? Science.
Yes, science! Don't forget to smash that subscribe button.
There are no limits.
The establishment wants you to think ivermectin is a horse dewormer instead of what it actually is, one of the most widely prescribed drugs in human history, which is what it is, and it's on the WHO list of essential medicines. And that shows you the overwhelming amount of propaganda that the establishment has been throwing around COVID-19.
This is the part where the white people start to applaud.
Oh.
And nod.
Oh.
Thank you, Jimmy. This was supposed to be the blackest Emmys ever. Y'all wouldn't have been able to handle how black it was gonna be. But because of COVID, we can't even get in the damn building. Mm-hmm. Quoting our great poets like Cardi B. Say it with me, Jimmy. Black lives matter. Louder, Jimmy. Black Lives Matter. Louder, Jimmy. Say it so that Mike Pence can hear it. Black Lives Matter.
A rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism that we must confront and we will defeat.
There are no limits.
The truth is, our leaders don't have answers. They don't even have explanations for what's going on. Worse than that, they themselves are deeply implicated in the systemic problems, in some cases the crimes that are dragging the country down. They know all this. They know their guilt. Here's the thing. They know that you know it too. And that's why they're afraid. They know why populism is rising, and it is. Populism starts when people start to figure that out, and they have. And that's why everything suddenly feels so unstable right now, because once again, real populism is brewing. They're refusing to admit their role in the decline. They're refusing to admit their failures, and instead, they are blaming the people they have failed. They're literally declaring war on their own population. And if you think we're overstating it, we're not. Here's the former CIA director describing what the enemy looks like.
And this threat from domestic violence extremists is much more challenging, I believe, than it was in terms of going after foreign terrorists. The domestic violence extremists are much more pervasive. Their numbers are much larger. When we were going after Al-Qaeda or other types of terrorist groups, cells here in the United States, their numbers were in the single digits of dozens, and was finding needles in a haystack. Here, there are a lot of haystacks with a lot of needles in them. They have the wherewithal. They already have the weapons that, if they so choose to use them, they can in fact carry out these deadly attacks.
But John Brennan, the former CIA director, has isolated the real problem. The real problem is you. According to Brennan, anyone who disagrees with, say, Susan Rice is worse than Osama bin Laden and more dangerous. These people, meaning you, quote, have the weapons. These terrorists. By terrorists, Brennan means tens of millions of American citizens who might have a firearm at home and didn't vote for Joe Biden. They're the threat, and we need to hunt them as we hunted Al-Qaeda. You just saw the clip. That's what he said.
And that is a bulletin released to all law enforcement earlier this week, that there is, until the end of April, a persistent domestic terrorism and around this belief that the election was fraudulent, that the COVID restrictions are unnecessary. All of those ideologies pushed by Donald Trump.
There's people who say there's no evidence, just are lying through their teeth, or they're deliberately ignorant or willfully blind to the truth.
At about 8 o'clock in the morning, we're going to roll this back and show it to you. There you go. So now they're going to start pulling these ballots out from under this table. This table, the black one, was placed there by the lady with the blonde braids at about 8:22 a.m. in the morning. So she put that table there. Yeah, I saw 4 suitcases come out from underneath the table. See the gentleman in the red. So he just pulled one out. So what are these ballots doing there, separate from all the other ballots? And why are they only counting them whenever the place is cleared out with no witnesses?
Is particularly this Dominion voting software. This was the software that was used in Michigan, and in Antrim County, they had Joe Biden up by thousands of votes. They claimed there was a software glitch. It was discovered, it was fixed, and then it turned out that President Trump was actually up by thousands of votes. We know that you and your team have been investigating this.
We have a person who's come forward with an affidavit inside of Dominion that has said that Dominion observed the 100,000 phony ballots that were brought in at 4 o'clock in the morning on November 5th that were all Biden ballots that appeared by every measure to be phony ballots, since they were brought in the back door. They were not in the proper containers. They were sticking out of the paper bags and cardboard boxes. And they were told that these were ballots that were needed to catch up to Trump because Trump was too far ahead.
And the headline is a little shocking. The secret history of the shadow campaign that saved the 2020 election. So it's a very long article, and it talks about how all these people got together behind the scenes to make sure that Joe Biden won the election. And they talk about the ACLU, they talk about labor getting together with the Chamber of Commerce and all these business people, and behind the scenes how they were all working together. This is from Time Frickin' Magazine. A well-funded cabal of powerful people ranging across industries and ideologies working together behind the scenes to influence perceptions, change rules and laws, steer media coverage, and control the flow of information. So that's what they're talking about, the shadow campaign. This is what they did. They worked behind the scenes to influence perceptions, change rules and laws, steer media coverage, and control the flow of information. And just so you know, nothing to worry about. They weren't rigging the election. They were fortifying it. Do you want to know? And they did it all in secret, because that's how you fortify elections, by doing things in secret and not being transparent. And look at this. Here's a dinner with Mark Zuckerberg. That's Barack Obama. That's Steve Jobs. That's Zuckerberg. That's Steve Wesley from the Wesley Group. That's Andor, spouse of the partner from Kleiner Perkins. There's Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google. There's Art Levinson from Green Tech. There's Larry Ellison from Oracle. There's John Chambers from Cisco. There's Reed Hastings from Netflix. There's Carol Bartz from Yahoo. John Hennessy from Stanford. And there's Dick Costolo from the Twitter. That's from Time Magazine. And they don't think this is they don't think this is a bad thing to tell people. Time Magazine thinks this is very cute. Imagine if Trump said, hey, there's a secret cabal working behind the scenes to censor free speech that would hurt the Biden campaign. They would call him crazy. This is what Time Magazine is actually uncovering and almost bragging about.
And then the other thing, just to close out a little bit, we are focused on one account right now, but this is going to be much bigger than just one account, and it's going to go on for much longer than just this day, this week, the next few weeks. It's going to go on beyond the inauguration. We have to expect that. We have to be ready for that.
The vast majority of people can agree that disinformation about, let's say, the pandemic is unhealthy. It's harmful. Well, big tech platforms say they are removing lies about vaccines and stamping out Stop the Steal BS and QAnon cult content. But reducing a liar's reach is not the same as censoring freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is different than freedom of reach.
There's this new social media app called Parler getting a lot of attention because conservatives are saying they're leaving Twitter and Facebook, going off to Parler because they believe Parler's a safer space for them. What we're seeing is even more of a bunker mentality in right-wing media, and ultimately that's not good for the country.
No, it's not good. It's a threat to democracy, that these people are in echo chambers and they're getting fed a diet of lies, essentially.
Because Facebook isn't creepy enough. Apparently, people have been getting messages asking them, are you concerned that someone you know is becoming an extremist? Get support. There's also messages that say things like, Kevin, you may have been exposed to harmful extremist content recently. And they're warning people that nefarious actors are trying to manipulate you, to manipulate your anger and your rage. And you must click the Get Support button because only Mark Zuckerberg knows how to make you feel better.
2 years later, after 9/11, a friend of mine tells me about this new contractor program, but with no filters, no automation. Cost $4 billion to deploy, modeled after mine, ingested everything.
Spending that kind of money, they're not stupid.
You would think intelligence would count for something in the intelligence business. But you want to know what it really is? Military industrial happiness management. The money flowing to the contractors, efficiency. Results, they go out the window.
The White House and the Office of Legal Counsel and, the president's attorneys, all of these guys had decided this would be legal to do. But we can't tell you why. We can't show you the legal authorization for it. You just got to take our word for it. And this became a mass surveillance program called Stellar Wind, which they said was supposed to monitor the phone calls and internet communications, emails, and things like that of everybody in the United States and around the world who they could get access to for links to Al-Qaeda. But on that basis, they started doing this in secret, and it was completely unconstitutional. It was completely illegal, even under the very loose requirements of the Patriot Act. But they did it for so long that they got comfortable with it, and they thought, this is a really powerful capability. What if we started using this for stuff that was other than terrorism? Because it wasn't finding any terrorists, because there weren't any terrorists. And we weren't allowed to know it. In the original case, there were only 8 members of Congress, called the Gang of 8, who knew about this. Then there were happening. And so what had happened was that we, the American people, had sort of lost our seat at the table of government. There's kind of a new class that's being created, a government class, and then the public. The system of checks and balances that's supposed to self-regulate our government had failed. And we abandoned all of the traditional political restraints and just social constraints. We entered this era of increasingly unlimited government as a result.
And if you could sit down with Joe Biden, what else would you say to him? How would you tell him to rescue our Americans that are over there?
Well, listen, the thing is, you can't make excuses, and we've heard a lot of excuses from the president at this point, that this would have happened with any withdrawal plan, or the president of Afghanistan run away, or I was just following through with the deal from the last administration. And all those are just excuses and placing blame on other people. The plan was a failure. Explain what went wrong, take ownership of what went wrong, and then come up with a plan on how to fix it. That's what he needs to do.
What was your reaction when you heard Jen Psaki say that Americans are not stranded over there?
I don't believe it.
Does the president have a sense that most of the criticism is not of leaving Afghanistan, it's the way that he has ordered it to happen, by pulling the troops before getting these Americans who are now stranded? Does he have a sense of that?
First of all, I think it's irresponsible to say Americans are stranded. They are not.
I just can't with this guy. I don't know whether to kill him or just take notes.
I mean, there's 10,000 people on the ground. The Taliban's running around. There's ISIS. There's Al-Qaeda operatives. That's not true as far as I can tell.
Let's say you don't want to take ownership and you're a real piece of shit. Okay, then you know what you do? Blame the Intel and be like, hey, Intel was totally wrong, or whatever other excuses he made, and then you say, but don't worry, I'm here to save the day, and this is what we're going to do now. Instead, he's like, nah, well, let's go with what we got. Freaking awful.
Would you be able to salvage the ship?
Yeah.
What would you do?
Follow the 4 laws of combat, right? Cover, move, simple, prioritize, and execute, decentralized command.
I would also get rid of anybody who's been in politics for longer in their life than they haven't been.
It's a disaster.
Yeah, I'd say 8 years max, maybe even 6.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that would be solid.
Get in, get out. No 50 plus years.
Yeah, it's very interesting when people that have served in the government making whatever $148,000 a year for 40 years, but they've socked away, giant fortunes with millions and millions of dollars. How did that happen?
Yes, science! Don't forget to smash that subscribe button. There are no limits.
We're going to do everything that we can to provide safe evacuation for our Afghan allies, partners, and Afghans who might be targeted. I've said all along, we're going to retain a laser focus on our counterterrorism mission.
We look like a little bit of a country that's sort of in decline because we can't even figure out an orderly withdrawal. It's not only did we spend the money, not only did we lose all these lives, not only didn't we have an orderly withdrawal, we couldn't even at the end guarantee the safety of Americans or do the right thing for all these people who risk their lives to help us fight clearly a useless war. I think it's more corrupt than that. I think that we basically engaged in a $2 trillion wealth transfer from the people of the United States, the citizens of the United States, to the military industrial complex.
The original mandate here was to go in, get rid of Al-Qaeda, and to also, kill Osama bin Laden, and to not have the Taliban giving safe harbor to Al-Qaeda. That mission got accomplished in large part in the first year or two. And then when we finally got to Osama bin Laden in Pakistan, I think it probably would have been a better idea to understand this is an unwinnable war, get in there, destroy the Taliban, leave,
and then say, if you come back, we'll do it again, but we're not going to stay here for 20 years.
The just cause here was to go get Osama bin Laden because he attacked us. And we should have gotten out of that country as soon as we realized that bin Laden was no longer there. I mean, that was basically after the Battle of Tora Bora. And if we didn't leave then, we certainly should have left after we got bin Laden in around 2010. So what were we still doing there? We were engaged in this exercise of nation building, which, by the way, we spent $6 trillion on nation building exercises in the Middle East between Afghanistan and Iraq. For what? For naught. This is why the electorate is in such a foul mood. How many of our domestic disputes are caused by the fact that we squandered that $6 trillion? That's more than Biden's entire domestic agenda. So we wasted all this money. It was a giant money funneling operation to defense contractors. It was like an unbelievable orgy of wastefulness. And by the way, that includes ignoring things like the sexual abuse of young boys by Afghan warlords who are our allies, which the New York Times reported on. We completely have swept that under the rug. Pages.
So complete incompetence in our government, complete waste.
Yes, science! Don't forget to smash that subscribe button. There are no limits.
This is not going away, everybody. It's not going away. Someone's going to have to explain what happened. There are 75 million people, somewhere around that are flipping out right now because they think their votes were stolen. They think the election was stolen. How is this going to actually come together and not end up in some type of civil war, whether it's a cold civil war, a hot civil war? Something is going to happen here, and it's not just going to go away. And for the mainstream media to do this, shame on you. You owe it to the country. God fucking damn it. New York Times, get.
This is looking at inside. Look at this. These protesters are inside Statuary Hall right now. You see the statues. This is a moment I never saw in my life. These individuals just rushed through security. They are inside Statuary Hall. This is a legendary.
A dark and dangerous moment in America's modern history. Donald Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol, where lawmakers were getting ready to certify Joe Biden's election win. Instead, senators and representatives were locked down while a mob invaded. The chaos highlights how much power the outgoing president has over his followers who are trying to overthrow
inside.
It gives me no great pleasure to call out Democrats. I was a Democrat. And for me, when I was younger, I bought the whole right-wing machine coming after Hillary Clinton, sexism, which is true, that's not wrong. But it doesn't mean it wasn't used as a shield to get away with a lot of nasty things. And so finally I had to come to the point where I'm not a Democrat, because everybody who's systematically traumatized, terrorized, harassed, stalked, and stolen from me during my time in California and in Hollywood has been a Democrat.
Watchdog blasts BBC after it declares vaccine passports to start this month, even though it's not the law. Canada's Conservative government says if they win the election, they will have vaccine passports, now competing with the left. Jim Acosta and the left saying that Trump supporters are Taliban terrorists while they actually back the Taliban.
What is it about society that disappoints you so much?
Oh, I don't know. The world itself's just one big hoax. It feels like all our heroes are counterfeit. Or maybe it's it that we collectively thought, even when we knew he made billions off the backs of children, that Steve Jobs was a great man. Or is it that we voted for this? Not with our rigged elections, but with our things, our property, but because we want to be sedated. Because it's painful not to pretend. Fuck society. I'm not saying anything new. We all know why we do this.
Elliot, you're not saying anything. What's wrong?
Nothing.
Don't forget to smash that subscribe button and follow me on Patreon.
Yes, science!
Look, 6 months ago, the White House was saying there's no way we would ever use some sort of a vaccine mandate. There's no
but
way.
Kamala said I would never take the vaccine that Trump's coming.
So did Biden.
Yeah, both of them said that, yeah.
Yeah, said we would never use a mandate. We would never try to force businesses or people to be vaccinated. Now they are saying that.
And they control, through Gates, they control also Facebook, Apple, Amazon, and Microsoft, and Google. And Google also was part of this deal where they became a vaccine company, and they're creating flu vaccines, COVID vaccines, cancer vaccines. They're all involved with making money, partnerships with the pharmaceutical industry.
The Google News Initiative has launched a multi-million-dollar global fund to fight misinformation about COVID-19 vaccines. It's dubbed the COVID-19 Vaccine Counter Misinformation Open Fund. Google will fund up to $1 million for each selected project. Priority will be given to collaborative projects of multiple news organizations and projects that
我注意到，在美国也会有一些网友甚至攻击您，说病毒是从您疫苗的这个研制过程中出来的。您在用什么样的心态面对这种声音？
I'd say it's an ironic if you take somebody who's doing their best to get the world ready and putting, in my case, billions of dollars into these tools. But that, we're in a crazy situation, so there's going to be crazy rumors.
You really think the Clintons are involved in Jeffrey Epstein's death?
I have no idea. I know he was on his plane 27 times, and he said he was on the plane 4 times. But when they checked the plane log, Bill Clinton, who is a very good friend of Epstein, he was on the plane about 27 or 28 times. Did Bill Clinton go to the island?
Photos to the Epstein saga. They reveal Bill Clinton posing with Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, as well as one of the people who basically one of Epstein's sex trafficking victims. If you go after Epstein, you're going to go after this person, this person, this person, this person, this person. Notice, why are all these photos of famous people coming out with Jeffrey Epstein? He made them take photos with him because that made them complicit in his actions. And they met with him and they knew with him. After Bill Gates and these people were photographed with him after he was a convicted pedophile, a registered sex offender.
It was reported at that time that you had a number of meetings with Jeffrey Epstein, who, when you met him 10 years ago, he was convicted of soliciting prostitution from minors.
I had dinners with him. I regret doing that. Were a mistake. They didn't result in what he purported.
It was reported that you continued to meet with him over several years.
I've said I regretted having those dinners. Well, he's dead, so in general, you always have to be careful. That's.
They reported that she's being shunted between the United States, the United Kingdom, Israel, by a bunch of very, very powerful people who have a lot to lose if her story is to come out. Where is the Department of Justice? Why is this woman not in an interrogation cell? I mean, she has the most direct knowledge. We have reporting that Prince Andrew called Ghislaine Maxwell trying to get her to absolve him of his alleged sex act with Virginia Roberts, who's accusing him, who he's been photographed with, and she wouldn't do it because she knows that it's probably true.
Just for the record, you've been on his private plane.
Yes.
You've been to stay on his private island.
Yes.
You've stayed at his home in Palm Beach.
Yes.
You've visited Ghislaine Maxwell's house in Belgravia in London.
Yes.
He was invited to Windsor Castle to your daughter Princess Beatrice's 18th birthday. Why would you do that?
Because I was asking Ghislaine.
But tonight isn't just about the people in front of the camera. In this room are some of the most important TV and film executives in the world, but they all have one thing in common. They're all terrified of Ronan Farrow. He's coming for you. He's coming for you. Spoiler alert, season 2 is on the way, so in the end, he obviously didn't kill himself. Just like Jeffrey Epstein. Shut up. I know he's your friend, but I don't care.
science! Don't forget to smash that subscribe button. There are no limits.
It figures it would be something like this.
You're anonymous. We are legion. United as one. Divided by zero. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.
No expression. Hide my head. I wanna drown my sorrow. No tomorrow. No tomorrow. And I find it kinda funny. I find it kinda sad. The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I ever had. I find it hard to tell you, I find it hard to take. When people run in circles, it's a very, very mad world. Mad world. Large and open. Mad